As always, this right here, right now, is the joy of being a live stream coming to you live from Brooklyn, New York. And if you're joining us anywhere on earth other than twitch.tv/deep mindfulness, what are you doing? Just kidding. We just have a few more features over here. So, folks, welcome. Let's make a little visual adjustment here. This camera's a little funkadoodle. Oh, yeah. Much better. So, folks, exciting day. This is day 3 of our exciting experiment of mind work, freestyle guided meditation. I love doing freestyle guided meditations because I come up with fun stuff, and I got a nice message from a friend, one of our participants here on the live stream, and a student who said, "Hey, I liked your freestyle meditation. You should do more of those." So, hey, maybe I will. There we go. Nice and cloudy. Welcome, folks. So tell me where on earth it is your exact... Oh, see, Rory goes ahead of the speed. Rory is always on top of the game over here. Coming at us from Kingston, Ontario. Welcome, Rory. Oh, it wasn't set up so you could do that in the chat. So if you want to do that again, it'll show up on screen. I like leaving my spelling mistakes up in there. It's always fun. Hello from Brooklyn, folks. Welcome. So folks are joining us from all over the land. There are folks here from Facebook, YouTube channel number 2, and people joining us from Discord. And maybe I should drop in the chat here where the hell we're going. Anyway, so the point is that we're going to have some meditation fun today. I'm very excited about that. Plus, we have our super foamy, it's like a butter thick matcha. You can just hear this thing crackle. Hear it sizzle. Ah, the mustache. You know, the irony is, I know you're thinking about lots of details around mustaches, but actually, because it's so short, it gets into things. If it were longer, I could put it off to the side. But it's short, so it gets into everything. I have to be careful. I have to take weird sips. So, folks, welcome. So nice to see you here. So nice to have you. Hello from London, 2020 CL. Oh, folks, in case you don't know, does that show up on the screen? I make the screen intentionally very small just to... oh, good, it does. It's so cute. Okay, so here's another advantage to being on... coming on Twitch, is that you can use all of these little emotes, all of these little characters here. You can, there's a million of them, and they're cute and fun. I don't really want a Santa Claus, but whatever. Make a Santa Claus and an alien. So, yeah, so you can use all sorts of little symbols there, which is fun. You can get your symbol game going. So, okay, folks, big fat question for you is, where are you coming from? What's going on? Melissa, welcome. Good to see you here. Where are you joining us from, Melissa? I forget what your location. It's not at top of mind. Good morning, John from Armonk, New York, which is Westchester area. Welcome, folks. Good morning. Good afternoon for some. We've been talking about whether we should switch the, I wonder what Nick thinks about this over in Sweden, whether we should switch the time of the live stream to be noon for our European folks so they can be off of work. Also makes it a little bit possibly more available for folks in California, but maybe now we're entering into work territory. I don't know. Hello from Barcelona, lovely. I don't know. I can't pronounce it. Barcelona. Welcome, Mario. Thank you so much. What is the correct pronunciation? I know it's not what I'm doing. Veritable Vagabond from Baltimore. I didn't realize you were in Baltimore. I don't know why I didn't make that connection. We have Emily. I don't know if she's here with us today, but Emily is from Bethesda, Maryland, and I went to school in Baltimore. Wise Occlusion here from Washington, D.C. Hey, you guys are right next to each other. There you go. you guys should meet up virtually, just like anyone could do from anywhere. I wonder what's going to happen after this thing chills out. It's also, I think there's this, oh, look, we have a new follow here from, let's see, Scott Nespin. Welcome, Scott. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for being part of this. I realize something now. Looks like my audio is linked to my VR headset right now, which is probably why I can't hear anything. I mean, I can hear myself, which is the most important part, right? Okay, let me fix that. I feel like I'm, no, I don't want to listen to albums. Okay, so I feel really silly because I feel like such a dork, because I've got VR now, and I'm like, VR is so cool. Let's see here, speaker side definition. Okay, let's see if that works. I'm going to listen to some audio, make sure I have audio, because I want to be able to hear you folks. Here's my zooming in on Windows.
In this video, I will show you how to zoom in parts of the video.
Very good. Okay, I can zoom. I can hear you. Okay, folks, so we're going to meditate for about... Oh, hello here. We're joining Scott Bitten from the Bay Area. Welcome, Scott. So nice to see you here. Yeah, folks, this is exciting. So if you're watching this, good to see you here. Good times. Let me know where you're coming from. We're going to meditate now. It's so funny. I can see the numbers of who's on the stream. And as soon as I mention how long we're going to meditate, people go right out the window. But we're going to meditate for 25 minutes, which is not actually that long. And trust me, you can survive. And trust me, you got the time. You're in lockdown. Might as well get that brain not working against you or working with you. Okay, so let's see here. Folks, finding a nice comfortable position that you can maintain in stillness for the duration of the sit. Training stillness in the body is a way of clearing the palate so that we can really explore what's happening. I'm trying to remember to say that, as some of you folks know. And we're going to practice in stillness, but of course, if you have the experience of potentially feeling overwhelmed or anything like that, you can feel free to move whenever you want. You can maybe take a breath or so beforehand so you know you're not moving impulsively, but you know you're not in meditation detention. Maybe you are in meditation detention. I don't know. I don't know what you've done. You can hear my wife sneezing in the background. Yeah, maybe you're in meditation detention, but tell you what, take the rest of the day off of meditation detention. If anyone gives you any crap, just tell them I said you could. So folks, finishing off your whatever beverage you have, or taking your final sips, final for a little while, don't worry, you're going to survive. Oh, what I was talking about with the VR, I started playing this game, Half-Life Alyx. Whew, what a good game. Anyone who actually knows video games is like, yeah, we knew that a long time ago. Boy, that is quite the VR game. VR, man, it really feels like you're outdoors. It really feels like you're somewhere else. It's interesting. I think VR is going to make a major comeback now that we have this thing going on. And I think that a lot of our interactions and a lot of our things are going to transition to being more on VR. The technology is not quite there yet, but to produce an avatar of ourselves live that actually moves along and has facial expressions, it's not there yet, but trust me, people are working on that very quickly. So then instead of a Zoom room, it can feel like we're chilling out on the beach with our friends, and but it really looks like we're there and really looks like they're there, and we can turn to different people, that kind of thing. You can do that now, except the person that you're looking at is Penguin on one side and Kurt Cobain on the other. So a little different, but still pretty fun. So folks, again, finding that lovely, comfortable position that you can maintain for the duration of the sit. At the end, we're going to talk about the class that we're launching. There's still space. I'm going to put this in the chat here in case you have to dip out early. deepmindfulness.io/progressive shin site. It'll be an in-depth class. Lots of fun. And we'll talk more about that soon. We're hoping to have some nice video content coming out about that coming soon. So that'll be fun. Uh-oh. Looks like one of our links to one of our YouTubes is broken. Oh, it wouldn't let you post a link. Whatever. Sorry, Facebook. Okay, folks, find that nice comfortable position. And when you're ready, we will begin. Should I do the entire meditation in a soothing radio show voice? In 1982, this pop hit was rocking the charts. So find that nice comfortable position. One sec here. Oh, we can't record. There it is. If folks don't know, we have a large archive of all of our guided meditations. And we record every one of these suckers. You can always listen back. Okay, we'll begin. Beginning by taking a few comfortable deep breaths. And just feeling the body rise and fall. Each time we arrive at a meditation or any moment, we arrive with the momentum of all of the previous moments. So as we sit here in our comfortable position, or if we're practicing lying down or standing or walking, recognizing that this experience now is built out of momentum. Many of the decisions we've made, many of the actions we've taken, and many pieces of momentum that are outside of our control. And just feeling the net result, the accumulative effect of all of these processes playing out. Not worrying about what the process or cause was, but noticing the effect. This current experience. And as we begin and move through relaxing the body, imagining we would need to get across to someone what this experience was like, someone who had never had contact with the body, some being who had no experience of sensation. How would we capture the depth and nuance of this experience? So not worrying about how we explain this, but first experiencing it ourselves. So allowing the body to breathe and noticing the body rising and falling. With each in-breath, there are some muscles that tighten. The diaphragm pulls down. This stretches the rib cage out, expands the upper chest and upper back, creating a kind of tightening. And then when we allow the body to breathe out, all of these muscles relax. So I'd like us to feel the muscles tightening on the in-breath and relaxing as the breath flows away. Not trying to control the breath. You may even notice the subtle sensations of tightening in the nasal passage or in the muscles around the throat on the in-breath. You may notice the subtle rising of the shoulders on the in-breath and the relaxing of these on the out-breath. And seeing if you can detect this movement of the shoulders in the elbows, even subtly. A pulling and a releasing. And if you can feel this in the elbows, feeling it in the forearms. In the wrists. And if you can feel it in the elbows and forearms and maybe even wrists. Of course, we can feel it in the hands, which are attached, pulled very subtly. moving down to feel the diaphragm. This is actually the only muscle that's required to tighten in order for the breath to function. So feeling that pressure move down into the pelvis and hips area. It's very strange, but the only thing that's required for us to breathe is for this diaphragmatic muscle to pull. So seeing if we can feel that tension, that very subtle muscle movement in the lower belly. At the front of the pelvic bone. Feeling the same tightening and relaxing at the bottom of the spine, at the tailbone. And each time the body breathes, we may notice that it just slightly expands the hip bones, the hip flexors. Very subtle. And in this way, we can detect these same sensations of the breath in the upper legs. Often, if there's some more predominant sensation, it's hard to detect. But seeing if we can find this nuance. And of course, at times the mind will drift away. This is because the detail of what we're observing is often quite subtle. And the mind will often be most interested in the most predominant sensation. So simply coming back. And not letting go of any particular breath sensation, just seeing if we can cast a wide net. If we can listen to the full chorus of all of these subtle breath sensations. Again, concerned with the overall experience rather than any one particular voice in the choir. And in this way, perhaps recognizing that it's not the mouth or lungs or tip of the nose or belly that breathes. It's the whole body. So experiencing the overall harmony. The overall experience of subtle breath sensations throughout the body. And the mind, of course, can flicker, can be distracted or pulled away, can be agitated and find it difficult to stay with these sensations continuously. And that's natural. And at the same time, we can begin to detect these subtle breath sensations as not necessarily linked to the actual in and out breath, meaning we can feel them regardless. In an ongoing way. So tuning more into this continuity experience. Then zoomed into the flickering or agitated nature of the mind. breathing in a way, attending in a way, aware in a way that supports continuous mindfulness. Ignoring the sharp edges, the pieces of our attention that break up this continuous awareness. Attention is so detailed, the zoomed in part of the mind, that it can tell us that everything is too broken up, too agitated, too turbulent to find continuity. But awareness can be aware despite these edges, these seeming interruptions. We may notice as well that the awareness doesn't need all of the markers of location, all of the parameters, the up, down, left, right, experiencing. It can simply be a collection of sense data. Somewhat or more so centerless, placeless. And of course, at times the mind is drawn to this spatial continuity, this sense of a center, a self or an observer. but recognizing that even this sense of a center, of a self, of an observer is a process. And observing the process of a little bit of light entering the eyes, emphasizing this as a process, as something which is ongoing. And eventually allowing the eyes to rest on a single point as they fully open. Noticing that all the subtle sensations of the breath, even if they're free from the breath itself, noticing the experience of place, the eyes resting on a single point, shows us and points to a kind of placelessness. The context of this point is within the context of no context, in the context of space, no particular point. And this single point that the eyes can rest on in this way, this form, this point in space, shows us and explains to us this empty field of no point. In this way, the form shows us emptiness, and the emptiness shows us form. Letting this piece of sense data show us how we might bring this practice into every aspect of our life. Okay. So what was that experience like? That's what I have to say. What was that experience like? So making any adjustments you need to allow the body to be comfortable. And as you do that, you notice any experience of form. See if you can notice the way that that form shows to us emptiness. So here's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to put the Zoom link in the chat. Nope. It didn't work. Oh, wrong chat, wrong tool. There we go. So, Zoom link is there. I should probably open Zoom then. Probably be a wise chain of operations. So what I'm going to do is invite folks to join us here on Zoom. And this will give us an opportunity to say hello. Here's what I want to try though. We'll wait till someone comes on. Okay. So, yeah, so what was that practice like? You can feel free to join us on Zoom if you'd like to talk about your experience, or if you'd like to just chat in the, mention it in the chat, we can talk about that. So 2020 CL says, thanks for the info. I felt genuine gratitude for my decision to learn meditation. Oh, that's lovely. John says, it created enough space so that there was room for all of me and all that I was experiencing. Well, that's lovely. Good to hear. I noticed the breath-related sensations I had never noticed before. All right. Well, that's pretty fun. Doing these freestyle meditations is so much fun because I'll start out and just be like, oh yeah, we're just going to, I mean, you notice, like, if you know my usual sort of format of meditation, I didn't get through like the first like few seconds. I was just like, okay, let's feel the breath. And I was like, oh, let's really feel the breath. And I was like, oh, there's a lot in there. And basically today's process was an exploration of different parts of jhana practice. Not every part. It was not exhaustive, and it certainly was not probably long enough to be stable in any one of these parts by any means. But one of the things that is really useful is this connection to what's called full body breathing. And for me, at least, one way to get there is to observe the subtle sensations of the breath and then use awareness to gather up all of the sensations as a general sort of category, and then start to notice that those sensations can be present even, regardless of the in or the out breath, that there's, kind of stability. Then I talked about the stability of awareness, that attention, in a way, it's a little bit like something zoomed in. So right now, if you see, like, my hand isn't, my hand's relatively still, but if I move it really close to the camera, every little movement is so clear, right? Every little tiny bit of movement is just so obvious. So what we'll do with the mind is often we'll zoom in using the attention, the part of the mind that does tend to zoom in, that tends to look very closely, which is also quite exhausting at times. And what we want to over time develop is that awareness doesn't need that kind of it's not so disturbed because it's not being pulled left and right and pulled in all these little ways. It can just sort of be aware of the larger experience. So you can observe the experience of hands, right? If you zoom out a little bit in that way, awareness softens the edges of this sort of zoomed in experience. And awareness has this kind of continuity. So we connected with the continuity of the awareness. And then what the heck do we do? The continuity of the awareness, and then that being less necessarily connected with any particular location. It was sort of this ongoing, temporally continuous, and spatially, you could say continuous, or, non-continuous, space sort of starts to break down because awareness isn't so spatially oriented. Attention is very, okay, this is here, that's there. And so then getting into the kind of dynamics of just timeless spacelessness. Again, these are all bits and pieces of things that one can do in jhana material, but of course, as everyone knows, I teach very much focused on insight material, so there's a heavy insight component to this. Less focused on the stability, more on the exploration in that way. Okay, so we have no one on Zoom, no problem, no pressure. Let's see, Veritable Vagabond says, I noticed a hum of anxiety ickiness. Maybe it's because I'm just getting my day started, or I'm purifying, or both. Because I think that we can overlook that these same experiences, like, oh, I'm experiencing purification, they're just ordinary experiences. So maybe we're zoomed in enough, or we have enough equanimity, or we're zoomed out enough, whatever the case may be, that the yucky feeling is recognized. The system is metabolizing material. Maybe it's old material, maybe it's current material. But just to notice that's there, but it's still the same sort of ordinary material of our lives. And I think that's something that I've been emphasizing a lot lately, is that all of these weird psychedelic and cool experiences are just the same fiber of our lives. We're just able to look at it just slightly differently, and because of that, it really changes the way we relate to it. So I'm going to put the Zoom link in here again. There's the Zoom link. Let's see. If one does an open awareness practice as opposed to a shamatha practice with an anchor, can one experience concentration states to arise reliably? Sure. Yeah, sure. Typically, okay, so my background, as many of you know, is in sculpture, right? And so I went to school and people think like, sculpture, like hammer and chisels type sculpture. I went to school and studied and was really interested in, and still quite interested in, conceptual art. And there's a relationship in conceptual art and post-minimalism. A lot of the discussion is about the relationship of physical reality to mental reality and how the two overlap, which one is predominant, which one sort of pushes and pulls. But there are these two movements. There's conceptual art and there's minimalism. Minimalism emphasizes the phenomenological, experiential, sort of bodily side, you could say. And then conceptual art emphasizes that the mind is, comes first. The mind is the most important piece. And then post-minimalism comes along and sort of gobbles both of them up and says, no, they're pretty dependent. There's you can't really escape the two. My favorite post-minimalist artist is, we have a visitor here on Zoom. Favorite post-minimalist artist is Bruce Nauman. And I think maybe today we could take a little look at some Bruce Nauman, because damn, if you want a real discussion and a interesting exploration of the relationship of the conceptual mind and the perceiving body, boy, Bruce Nauman will get you there. Usually through the route of don't know mind. Usually you just don't know what the hell's happening, or like, why is this, it's a really interesting exploration. Okay, so we have Rory joining us here. Rory, let me set this up so that we can, let's see, we can do this. Here we go. Okay, monitor 2, Rory is there, but I want to try, I figured out this new Zoom thing. I can zoom in based on, does this work? Should work. My zooming, I yesterday set up zooming so that it would be a nice little feature here. Oh no, it's the Apple menu. That's what it is. Okay, here we go. I was using the wrong button. There we go. There's my friend, Mr. Zoom. I just want your face to be a little larger here, but maybe it's a little silly because it looks sort of cartoony, right?
I don't know. I'm seeing myself on Zoom, not on Twitch.
Oh, I see. Okay, so we're just going to skip that. Well, I don't know. It's nice to see you there. I just got to make the window.
I had to turn the volume, mute the volume on Twitch, because I was getting 2 feeds from here and from Twitch.
That'll do it. I mean, listen, now you know my suffering. It's like,
yes.
I have to manage all these, but they're all happening at once. I have to figure out exactly which one gets broadcast, which one does not get broadcast, and it's like the level of potential chaos is very high. So, Rory, tell me, what was your experience like?
Well, as I commented, I think it's the first time I ever noticed so many subtle sensations all the way through the body, just from breathing. And that was really helpful to notice the pervasiveness of how, like a little bit of movement in the diaphragm actually reverberates into the pelvis and into the knees, and how the expansion of the chest can actually be felt ultimately in the wrists and the hands. That was in a new experience for me. So I appreciate that deeply, and it will, I think, give me it created interest for me. And whenever I'm doing meditation, I'm always looking for places that are interesting, because then that seems to allow me to maintain my focus longer if I can find curiosity about some particular facet that I'm focusing on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nigga.
Oh, we have someone. What are they?
Nigga.
So someone who wants attention.
Nigga.
It's actually pretty easy to fix. All we do here is we just mute, and it's funny. So yeah, it was a Zoom bomb, which is cute, but so so Rory, we'll get back to what you were saying in a second, but it's so funny because I always get very curious about people who are like, okay, I'm going to bomb this thing. I guess, it's titillating. It's like, oh, wow, but it's so, I don't know, to me, it's so, it's such a dead meme. You know what I mean? It's like, okay. And there's like the 3 words that you can say that are like, oh my God, people are upset. And, I wonder, is it boredom? Is it sort of like, I guess everybody wants to feel a little important, right? Everyone wants to feel like they have a place in the world. It's, they're doing something that is like, something meaningful maybe. I don't know. Seems like a dead meme to me. So I muted. Sorry, real quick here. I just want to unmute you here, Rory, because it was muted. For obvious reasons. Yeah, and it's also like a thing for me is like I typically run this thing pretty unprotected because it's really small, and so
right.
Yeah. But what's valuable right now is whatever came up for people as you're watching that, to notice that in the body, to notice that as an experience in that way, and yeah, and to have a little bit of self humor as to like. That is, silly. Also, a little compassion for the person because they're probably 10, and hey, they're sitting here on a live stream for meditation, so that's probably good. And also, a bit of understanding that like they use offensive words because it'll get people excited, but also there's people who are in really, really terrible, whose lives are really painful, who hearing a word like that or that kind of thing is going to be more painful than it might be for us as like, white folks just like meditating and that kind of thing. So anyway, just saying that, seeing how it works as far as diffusing that kind of thing. But back to what you were saying, notice, and it's funny because as I notice the experience of the breath in the body now, what comes along with it is the emotion, the sadness of that, sort of some of the stuff I just talked about. But that subtle sensation of the breath that can be present in any experience is available all the time. I didn't go into it because I wasn't sure how I could guide in this direction, wasn't sure how to translate it. But people who can get attuned to this, you can feel the breath in the feet, right now as you're talking, and actually feel it in all these, these larger parts of the body. So it can be this very subtle way to connect with awareness in that way. So. Yeah. Anything else?
Go ahead. I liked the suggestion you made about how zooming out can have a calming effect. And I've known from Shinzen's system about zooming in and zooming out, but I had never made that connection between zooming in, having more rough edges, and being in that way maybe more agitating than zooming out.
Yeah, and I think that it's not that one is better than the other. Obviously, we would be disabled if we didn't have one or the other. But they can work in harmony. And I think that that's kind of one of the big contributions that someone like Culadasa makes, is that he talks about them explicitly and also talks about like what are their characters, what are their tendencies. I'm not sure, and I'm sure it's in there somewhere, but I have this I have an interest, and I'm actually seeing if we can get Shinzen to come on the stream to talk about this, but basically this emphasis on how the how awareness is doesn't care about location and doesn't care as much about the XYZ axis of our senses, which, as you know, all of our senses occur on an XYZ axis until that axis breaks down. But awareness is a little bit of a shortcut to just crack that stuff apart and start to see, okay, this is an extremely flexible experience. I think the challenge that I have, and again, I'm a big fan of the work that Culadasa did in general, does, and that said, I think that there's this sense of like, you must do this and this and this and this, and then you'll get to why, and it's like that stuff's available immediately. Like we did a practice today that was like a sweep through a lot of the jhanic material, and for me it's just, you pick one thing and you hone that, and you'll just be better at that, and the system will make its own leaps and bounds. We don't have to like perfectly get each stage perfect and then we'll move on. It's anyway, I digress. So thank you so much for that. We have a few comments here in the chat. Thank you for joining us, Rory.
Okay, I'm going to sign off now.
All right, buddy. Appreciate it. Okay. So we have a few comments here in the chat. And let's see here. Let's see, Scott, there was a lot of agitation and tension, and it was hard to stay with the breath sensations. It slowly settled down and went away. Okay, so a couple things. One is that we were talking today about how a lot of the agitation is actually because the system is quite zoomed in, and by allowing the system to detect generalities more, larger body of material, without needing to see fine detail necessarily, it can often smooth that out. And then let's see here, we have, so that was just one tactic, one way to work with that. 2020 CL says, I had a thought that seems quite usual, and then and when I realized I was distracted, the thought seemed like nonsense in retrospect. Yeah, the mind is very good at telling us whatever thought arises is the most important one. And it says, pay attention in that way. Let's see here. Speaking of interesting stuff happening on the cushion, I've been going to... I've been doing shamatha for a while. This is Veritable Vagabond. I suppose I'm at a point where I want cool stuff to happen. Well, that's fine. Like moving along the progress of insight. And the stuff Shinzen and Ingram talk about in their books. Well, all that stuff is readily available. I think that there's a key is that the ordinary stuff is the same material. It's just sort of reorganized. Maybe my concentration isn't high enough yet, ? Or maybe I'm not emphasizing Vipassana enough. Okay. I talked about this in yesterday's stream, and I think this is an important factor. If we can, and yesterday what we did was we watched what we call Namarupa. We watched the mind organize material, and then watching that as a process often helps us recognize that the organization of material itself is a process. We tend to think of things as objects and like, oh, they just are objects. But we can watch the mind snapping things into being objects, into things. And that snapping shows us that even the noun experience of reality, the self, world, inside, outside, me as the primary character, all of these things, all the objects in our room, this kind of things, that it's actually a verb tense experience. It's actually an ongoing process. So through observing that, over time, we start to recognize that the weird stuff, which is great, fun, have a good time, is just the same stuff as the ordinary stuff, except it's organized differently. And so at some point we get I don't want to say we get this or this happens, but this is my experience. At some point, my experience was I started to see and experience the ordinary as just as important and just as insight-laden as the weird psychedelic stuff. And that's pretty important. That's an important place to be. And so if you feel and sense and detect the organized experience of your reality right now, recognize that as a kind of tension, as a kind of organization, as a collection or gathering of our sense data. And then when we go into some soft meditative space, a lot of that stuff loosens up and then snaps back. Part of our job is to recognize that that's neither of those is particularly stable in and of itself. So when you talk about the weird stuff happening, just know that the non-weird stuff is just as weird. It's just the same material. It's actually, I mean, literally, I don't know if I can say literally same material, but it's the same experiencing data set, just reorganized. So I don't know if this is actually available for anyone unless, we had someone on the stream for a second there who disappeared. I don't know if this is actually available if somebody hasn't experienced both sides of this thing. But if you can, realize that this experience you're having right now has all of that material that they're talking about. All of that weirdness is, pregnant in our current experience. If that's possible. The other thing is that we are doing the Progressive Shinsight course, and we talk about each one of the stages in the Progressive Insight as rather a skill rather than a stage, because this stage idea is it's more noun creation, it's more object creation. Oh, there is a stage, and I, this magical object, will be at this stage one day. Another object, like every piece of it, is more solidification. So, how are we going to experience like deep flow and deep impermanence when? I don't want to say that's not a good idea because I like maps and that kind of thing, but by creating this map within ourselves, not the Dharma map, this sort of idea, it creates a lot of solidity. So notice right now the shape of the idea of a map of experiences and where I fit on that map, and that I'm not there yet. And all of that object making is the system holding that in place. And that gripping is... it's sort of awesome. It's sort of like, wow, look at it create this shape of reality. And we were talking about today that sort of, this is a geometric, I guess, metaphor, that single point, you can look at a single point or notice any object, but a single point tells us about the space that it exists in, because it is this point and it is not all the space around it. It is not the undifferentiated spatial experience, which is required, right? How do you make a point in space? It is a space in an infinite, expanse. I think this may be why I like geometry, because it actually rhymes with my personal experience. It's also very easy for the mind to understand. But so a single point that we look at, and again, I wouldn't, it's a metaphor, but the goal is for it to be a perceptual metaphor, to observe and experience that particular point and then recognize that that is occurring within this undifferentiated world of awareness. So attention and awareness rhyming together that way. So that shape of, hey, there is a map, and maybe I could be there in the future. Maybe I'm not focusing on vipassana or more on this, or just notice the shape and the experience of that now. That is a fundamental direct route to all of the psychedelic material that's available in that. So that's, in a way, it's like, you're there, and it's hard to maybe get across that you're there. But hopefully that's helpful. Curious what your response is there. Airplane John says that really triggers a lot of anger in me. I think you're talking about the person who video bombed. Triggers a lot of anger in me. Me slim trying, maybe still trying to get lost narrative around it. Just staying grounded in the actuality. Keep my awareness more open and not get sucked into my own story, but feel the physical sensations of the anger in my body. Yeah. So a couple things. We're on a certain medium, and I'm pretty loose with the sort of guideline, or not guidelines, but, I put the Zoom link up and stuff like this, knowing that this will happen eventually. So just know from my perspective, it's an inevitable thing. We've all got to absorb that. And I know we're going to lose people. People are going to be uninterested or feel offended or feel the sensations you're feeling and not come to be part of the live stream. But here's what I want to just emphasize. That same thing is going to happen everywhere in our life if we can't learn to metabolize it. Now, that's not to say like, hey, take your medicine, this is going to happen. I don't want to imply that. What I do want to imply, or what I want to emphasize, is that right now we have an opportunity, which is to observe what occurred and put better guidelines in place for this kind of thing, better fail-safes. I think I know I can use a waiting room feature on Zoom. It's just hard. There's so many pieces happening at once that it's hard to tell like when someone's on Zoom, or I can figure something out. But the other thing that I find really helpful is to know that it's a sort of it's a ongoing meme on the internet, is like people going on saying something that they think is like the most offensive thing and then being like, ha ha ha, look at the people get upset. And for me, it's sort of relieving to realize that, like, it's an attempt to make people upset. It's an attempt to do that, and part of my job is to talk about it very openly, and often that diffuses it, and talk about the person and say, hey, yeah, what do we think gives people that sort of that tendency? So here we have 613. There's my dyslexia style. Thank you so much for following. If you're here on Twitch, hit that follow baton, and that gives you a chance to be part of the crew and to know when we go live. So let's see here. John says, sorry about the less than ideal wording. I really struggle with intrusion. I actually think it's a good opportunity to practice with. So also notice, John, and this might not be the case, but it's something I try to notice for myself, is that when I get quite upset, what happens is the system will lean towards disassociation, and so the organization of my sort of narrative self gets sort of funky because I'm protecting. There's a protection mechanism that comes on board. I notice that hand-eye coordination goes down, and often language will break down. This is a classic thing that as a therapist they listen for, is listening for when the narrative coherence of the language starts to break down in different ways. And that may or may not be the case, but just to check in and see, hey, was the upsetting experience that I had, did that cause the system to begin to self-protect through disassociation, which everyone does, and was that responsible for some of the sort of grammar things that were sliding around, etc.? And if that's the case, it's actually a deep invitation to look at how the system is responding in these sort of subtle ways. It's very powerful. And okay, so going back to the actual topic of that, and having a little bit of compassion for this person who, man, they're like, again, compassion for two people, two groups, maybe one more than the other. This person who's like alone and isolated and just like, hey, like I exist, like I'm important, right? Like I'm doing a thing and everyone will look at me, right? Like if I do this thing, I'll get attention. And there's something like, kind of sad about that. And, ideally we'd give them a hug and be like, cool, like, maybe direct that attention towards something a little more fruitful. And then there's also like the compassion for yourself, who experiences the sort of turbulence around that. I experienced the turbulence around that pretty intensely, and then still having to conduct all this is like, it's a lot. I wish I could just stop and be like, oh, that was really sad. And then there's people who are very affected by words like that, or maybe they're not affected by words like that. They've grown a thick skin, but their lives are affected by that, and we can sort of recognize that. So that's the complexity of living a life, is it's not just our own personal sort of happiness project. It is a complex of these different pieces, all of which come together to help us move towards living a more fulfilled life. Yeah, and I appreciate that Rory's saying, and I appreciate that you're talking about the intrusion and sharing here. That's, we have people who are moderators on our the chat, which anyone's welcome to be if you want to be a moderator. And if somebody comes on, I think right now if somebody comes on and starts spamming, we have people who can just kick them out really quickly. What I actually want folks to do is to mute them and get them to be quiet, but not actually kick them out, so that we can still talk to them and say, hey, like, that's like, we're here to help ourselves and help other people, and that's not really that helpful. but we have to set up the same thing for Zoom. So I was sort of waiting for that to happen because I knew something like that would happen, but I apologize that that is the case. So folks, I'm not seeing any more questions, and I think somebody popped in on Zoom, a non-intruder, but they're gone now. So folks, thank you so much for joining us here. We're going to slide away into the ether. Before we do, though, I want to remind folks that we have an upcoming class. Oh, P.S. Pro tip. I've decided but haven't changed the material. I think right now, I'm pretty sure the Thursday group is actually going to switch to be a Saturday group. Saturday at noon Eastern, which should be good for our West Coast people and our folks on the on the European continent. So hopefully that's helpful. I'm pretty sure it's at noon, going to be Saturday, and we'll take a look from there. Yeah. Well, yeah, it is pretty infantile, and I don't think there's a ton of thought behind it. It's also like, again, it's like a popular like thing to do, which is like, that's. I try to use their language, and if you call that a dead meme, it's like so like like a kick in the face, which it is a dead meme. So, okay, so folks, I have a wish for you though. Oh wait, before we do that. Here is Deep Mindfulness. Okay, so the address is deepmindfulness.io/POS, which is for Progress of Shinsight, and check it out. That is where we have all the information for the upcoming course. Love to have you there. And I just want to state, especially folks who are watching this live stream, love you folks. If you just cannot afford it, have a conversation, because there is flexibility as far as some people paying more so we can have scholarship, that kind of thing. Lovely folks. So I have a wish for you, and the wish is as follows. My wish for you is that you have a lovely day, first of all, and second of all, that you are able to just connect with the experience of a body that breathes, a body that can be aware, the dynamics and the fun experience of being alive. And to remember that all of the complexities, all of the difficulties, all of those sensations that arise are all natural. They're all normal, ordinary human experiences. And by treating them as natural and allowing those sensations to be there, taking action that's appropriate to what's needed rather than what might be unconsciously driven, this is part of the path to living a fulfilling life. So thank you folks so much. So very appreciated. And thanks again. Looking forward to seeing everyone very soon. In less than 72 hours, we'll be back here to party down more unscripted, unplanned, unboring guided meditations. Folks, very excited to see you soon. Have a lovely weekend. See you all. Bye. That was a bummer. Yeah, someone just came on and they're just using the N word and the F word. There's no command to quit fucking programs in this damn thing. Now I have to do this one thing, which is part of the stream. Babe, fun fact, doing the stream and the journeying thing, did you hear the meditation?
No.
You should, I would love if you listened to it. It was, let me see, where are you? It was like, it was like it feels like silly, but it was like pretty fucking inspired. Like it was like, I I started just like, oh, observe the breath. And I was like, oh, observe these subtle breath sensations. I was like, oh, observe these very subtle breath. And I was like, oh, and they don't need to be attached to the breath. Oh, and also, and I just like went through like a huge spectrum of jhana things. And yeah, it was really cool. To formless things, and then like opening the eyes and like, okay, look at this single point, and like that single point is telling us about the void that it exists in, because that's how points work. Like there's an emptiness that it, and it's like, so that's form is emptiness, emptiness is form, is like,